We have a special guest today, a Virginian from Culpeper County Sheriff's Office.
Yay, Culpeper.
Sheriff Scott Jenkins.
Yeah.
Hey, Sheriff, great to have you, man.
Thanks for letting me be on the show. Enjoyed it.
Okay, so Sheriff Jenkins, let's talk a little bit about Culpeper sanctuary cities and the gun legislation that's being passed in Richmond. 2 more gun bills got out of the Senate today. One having to do with the felony if you leave your gun around a child and it's not locked up, somebody finds it. Also, if somebody steals it now, you're going to have to report it within 24 hours or bad things will happen to you. And but Culpeper is a sanctuary city for the Second Amendment. How does this work, sir?
Well, long before the movement got really strong, I took a stance on December 4th saying that I would be willing to swear in hundreds or thousands of citizens as deputy sheriffs if need be for these overreaching gun laws. Along that time through December, we saw counties all over Virginia. I was amazed at the large response that people that have stood up and said enough is enough. They weren't elected on that mandate. And so that said, we've watched these bills go from, they literally threw everything they could against the wall to see what would stick. They've watered them down some, but we didn't need any of the bills. They need to look at mental health care for what it needs to have funding and all the other issues that they can address other than the gun of law-abiding citizens. Criminals aren't affected by these laws. And, of course, the red flag laws is a whole other subject of, no due process and how unconstitutional all the bills are is something they're not listening to. They're just not hearing the citizens from all over the states as well as the sheriffs who have stepped up and took a strong stance.
So, Sheriff, we're with Sheriff from Culpeper, Scott Jenkins. Sheriff Jenkins, let's break a couple of these issues down. And let's get to the first one, which is the sanctuary cities issue, which basically Culpeper passing a resolution and you endorsing it that says you're not going to participate in the confiscation. Well, Congressman, Democrat, 4th District Don McEachin said, okay, fine. You don't want to participate. You don't want to enforce the laws of Virginia. I've got a news flash for you. I'll get the governor to send in the National Guard. How do you respond to that?
Well, just to be clear, though, first and foremost, I'm unique from all the other sheriffs. I didn't take the stance of saying I would not enforce laws that were duly enacted. Matter of fact, my statement was I fully intended to, unless they were clearly unconstitutional. Other sheriffs have not done that.
Right.
My stance was that for hundreds of years, we've been allowed to swear in deputies, whether it be for a posse, a reserve deputy force, or regular deputies. And my intent was, and still is, if they're going to pass these bills, I can allow citizens. I have thousands of concealed carry permit holders that carry weapons that have 15-round capacity magazines and so forth now. My intent would be swear those people in as deputy sheriffs, and they'll be able to keep them. They'll be available for call-up if I need them, but that's my personal pushback on this unconstitutional overreach.
So now, you would take advantage of basically a loophole in your system.
It's legal
to get around it.
Yes.
It's legal, and you would just, if you had 1,000 people that fit that in Culpeper, you would deputize 1,000 of them.
I have 5,000 plus concealed carry permit holders. My intent was it would probably be that many or more just in Culpeper.
That you would deputize?
More than that, because I can deputize them from anywhere in Virginia.
No kidding.
Within the state of Virginia.
So anybody that falls outside that or falls, let's call it victim of these new laws that are being passed that many of us believe are totally unconstitutional and limit our forefathers' vision of being able for us to keep and bear arms. Anywhere in Virginia, we could come to you. Like if it was me, I could just come to your office and you could deputize me, and then I'm free of that.
I would be legally able to do that. Obviously, we would screen people and so forth to filter through the right people. But my message has sometimes been lost in the shuffle when a lot of other people wanted their few minutes in the spotlight, and I want to make that clear. I was never one of those that started screaming from the beginning that I won't enforce certain laws. Mm-hmm. My duty as a sheriff first is to enforce those laws enacted. But I'll reference a good example, though. When you see so clearly as a sheriff something unconstitutional, such as in Caroline County, where the Loving case occurred, I think that, in the height of our civil rights era, is a good example. That sheriff could have said, no, we won't enforce that law. Mm-hmm. We won't arrest a white male and a black female simply for being married. But they did. And I think looking back on that, we would applaud a sheriff who had said, no, I will not allow that to be enforced. But instead it went to the Supreme Court. So now I compare this by saying I see this when the Supreme Court has said we can have weapons that are in common use, and we're going to try to ban the most popular rifle in America, the AR, or we're going to ban so-called high-capacity magazines. It's a standard magazine. 15 rounds is standard. We're going to restrict those. Well, I see that as something that needs to go through the court process, and I'll be a part of that if that's what needs to. But we've seen them pull a lot of those things back, the assault weapons ban and so forth. They've really modified those now because I think they even see not just the strong pushback from our citizens, but I think they know what's going to happen when it hits the Supreme Court, and they don't want that victory for the people and their gun rights. But I'll go back to my stance. One sheriff in each state taking the stance I do, Congress and our state legislatures can enact a lot of gun restrictions and try to stomp out our Second Amendment, but sheriffs can be that last line of defense. We have that authority for hundreds of years.
Because
we were the first law enforcement. We're elected directly by the citizenry, and those people are who we're sworn to protect. And their right to defend themselves in a rural county such as mine, where a deputy may be 10 or 15 minutes away, we're suddenly saying we're going to pull that right, that ability to defend themselves until law enforcement gets there because their weapon happens to have a few more rounds in the magazine. Well, who's going to replace that? When you take away that standard magazine, who's making that 12 round or 13, whatever number arbitrarily they pick? Exactly. So there's a lot to talk about on that, but my strongest message of today is it is beyond belief to think that people like Janet Howell and others in our legislature most recently, first they started by threatening to take away insurance from our deputies. They threatened to do all sorts of things, and then when that didn't work, they dangled a $10,000 raise for me and other sheriffs, which I told them to stick it. And then they have the nerve to say they're going to take the 3% raise, the pittance, away from the deputy sheriffs who don't implement policy. We set the policy. They have no choice but serve at our discretion. And those deputies who work hard every day, the men and women on the street out there protecting us, are the ones that they're taking that small raise away to punish them for what the sheriffs have chosen to take a stand on. That is appalling, and she should be ashamed of herself. I say she, I'm sorry, I'm backing up. This Janet Howell's most recent attack, after that 3% they pulled, her next act was to try to take the pension of me and like-minded sheriffs who have taken this stance, and that bill has already been proposed for the next session. Now, that is the degree, the length that they will go to stop us from standing up for the Second Amendment. These people have basically, they're off the rails. I don't think they're in touch with the citizenry. I don't think they ever thought that they would see 100-plus localities take a stand the way they did. Have you seen that for any other subject ever? I've never seen it in my life. No. That's how strong Virginians feel, and these people are tone deaf. They are bought and paid for. There's no other excuse. And Levine, writing that bill to start with, as I've said before, talk about one of Governor Northam's useful idiots. The man didn't even understand the function of the weapons he was trying to stand and explain, let alone properly write a bill that would address real issues.
House of Delegates member Mark Levine,
exactly,
in Northern Virginia, that wrote the bill basically banning everything. So, look, why is the AR-15 so popular?
Well, it's a standard sport shooting rifle for competition. We'll see them in 3-gun competitions and others. It's a weapon that's very easy to shoot. For defense, for something that's semi-auto and has a good capacity and so forth, a lot of features that might appeal to someone wanting to use them for sport shooting or defense, it has an appeal. But I'd also like to remind people to go back to the Second Amendment and what it really means. It was not written for hunting or for sport shooting rights, even home defense. Or
for squirrels.
Exactly. Point to our state flag. It was written to defend against a tyrannical government. People don't like to talk about it because it's ugly. It's not politically correct. They don't want to talk about anything that might remotely denote violence. But the fact is, those weapons of war back at the time it was written were equivalent. And today, that AR, the argument is, well, it's a weapon of war. Well, if it is, which it is not a select fire weapon. It's not an assault weapon, but they tend to call it that. It's a semi-automatic centerfire rifle, and it's not even a really powerful cartridge at all. Their weapons far more powerful. But, these uneducated people on the function of weapons and ability of weapons choose to write these bills and appeal to the masses that just don't understand weapons, and they say that this scary-looking weapon is what they want to ban, when in fact there are plenty of other weapons just as deadly and can create just as much carnage. much. But it's a slippery slope. Once they take the ARs, if it's because of the high cap magazine, which there are others that have that, they're only going to continue on because the shootings will continue. The mass shootings, such as yesterday and all across the country, we've seen. They've got to focus on criminals, the mental health crisis in America, and other things. Not a tool, because these are just tools. And if they aren't doing it with an AR, they're going to do it with another choice of a weapon until they take all of the weapons. And that is not something that America can allow. We have a right to have those weapons for a reason, and we have to stand now and defend it, because this is the strongest attack I've seen in my lifetime.
We're back. John Fredericks Radio Network, Truck the Truth Across America. Great to have you with
at CPAC.
Culpeper County Sheriff Scott Jenkins. Sheriff, let me just ask you this point blank. The red flag laws that are going to pass in Virginia, a lot of people are not concerned about due process. The one that seems to be making it through is it's backwards. They can take your gun now, and then there's 14 days cooling off period to keep the confiscation. A judge would have to sign it. But a lot of people are concerned not with the due process, but with people confiscating your guns and making you go through this process to keep them as retaliation for a fight, for an argument, for you want to get even with somebody.
Bad neighbor.
You don't like the way they cut their grass. You don't like their hedge. You don't like the fact they didn't cut their grass. They cut too many limbs off a tree. How do you respond to that?
Well, I understand the intent, and the goal is definitely a good one, but they're going about it all wrong. We have a mental health system now that allows us to get emergency custody orders. Deputy sheriffs will go out and take them into custody and have them evaluated, and it's mental health services' job to decide whether they're going to be held or not, and so forth. What they're trying to do is say that at that point, that officer is going to search the home. You think about not just the Second Amendment, but our rights against unlawful search and seizure. We're going to search that home. Of course, if we encounter other illegal activity or things on their face that are illegal, then that may result in another charge against the person besides the crisis that they're in. But we're going to then seize, because a lot of people say, "Oh, no, you'll only go this far." No, a firearm can be very small. And if you think about it, just that thought. You're going to search an entire residence to make sure there are no firearms there, take them into custody and put them wherever. We serve a lot of these orders. All localities do. But without any due process, this person's going to lose their right to have those weapons at that moment. Not after an actual hearing, a judiciary, someone stepping in to say, that both sides are heard. We're just going to take those weapons away, and in a couple weeks you have a right to a hearing. That's not how the law is designed to work. It's not correct. It's unconstitutional to do so. And I think that we're going to have a strong pushback on that as well. We're seeing it all around the country with similar laws. People are dying from these
Sheriff,
things.
I think you're spot on here, and we need to really get you on more to advocate this, because both of us agree that there is a place in society for a red flag law, right?
Yeah.
I agree with that. I've been an advocate of that, but it's the way you do it. And I think I think what you're saying is, like I said, this is backwards, right? I mean, if you wanted to, it's almost like when you want to take a child away from a parent in a custody battle, right? You can't just come in and take the child and then you have to prove you want him back, right? Or if you want to get a restraining order, right? To get the restraining order, you have to go to a judge. They present the facts. I think the restraining order in Virginia you can get now is like 2 days. And then you have to go in and there has to be a hearing. But the way they're doing it now is they can come in, take your guns, and that's it. And then you got 2 weeks, and then you got to spend the money to get lawyers, and you haven't. And there's no evidence you've done anything. The other thing that is really concerning me with this is police then can come into your home because somebody flagged you, and now go through your home trying to find your guns, right? Open up your closets, go under your bed,
argument
attic,
with a wife, with your wife,
and who knows what they're going to find in there?
Girlfriend,
and we have laws to protect. I mean, there are laws. I think we fought a revolutionary war over no-knock warrants.
Exactly.
If I'm not mistaken, I mean, isn't that why we rebelled from the King of England, right? No-knock warrants. I mean, you're going down here a dangerous path. So, in concept, we both agree with the policy, I think the way it's being implemented is ass backwards.
I agree. I do. And these are the same people that wrote these other ridiculous bills. And these same people are the people that think that it's logical that if a baby is born today and something happens to that child and it's murdered outside the womb, we're going to investigate and place a charge of homicide. If we allow a doctor up to moments before birth to remove that baby and kill it, well, somehow that's not homicide and not a crime. The logic is a bit off, although that's not really my area to step into. But there's coming a time with, as far as they're going with a lot of these laws, that a lot of people are going to have to take stronger stands because it's insane.
I got to wrap, Sheriff. I just got to read this text from Ken in Chesapeake who says, criminals can use the red flag law to get their targeted victim harmed. Ken in Chesapeake. Culpeper, Sheriff Scott Jenkins. Sheriff, thanks for being with us.
Welcome to West Virginia anytime.
Thank you.